Welcome to the Two Boots Word Vault podcast. With thanks to the Cracked Walnut Poetry Collective and hosts Frank Gioa and Bill Anderson, the following is a recording of the Thank You for Your Service reading, July 30th, 2025.
Combat patch. He saluted the lieutenant, signed the discharge papers. It was over. No longer a prefix before his name. Took off the uniform in his '59 Ford. Threw his field jacket out the window, driving home. Didn't think to remove the red and gold insignia, the one they gave him for Vietnam. He was sorry he acted on impulse. Should have saved the combat patch. Had worn it on his right shoulder, proof he had been in the war. Had seen the body bags litter the ground. At night, he thought about the body parts, the sacrifices others had made. His life was no longer the same. It would never be the same. Hi, everyone. My name is Frankie. Thanks for being here. We appreciate your support very much. Thanks to the Highland Park Library, Cracked Walnut, and Bill Anderson for asking me to organize this event. I'm very pleased to be reading with these very accomplished poets. Thank You for Your Service is a group reading featuring George Colburn, Timothy Young, Jessi Marie, and myself, Frank Gioa. We will read our work and reflect on how we were affected by the Vietnam and Iraq wars. After the reading, there will be a short Q&A and an open mic, time permitting. Our books will also be available for sale. They're on the back table. I was thinking, as I walked up here, if there was anything I wanted to say about the trauma of war. But I think it's best that I let the poets speak for themselves. So let's begin. George Colburn is an award-winning, internationally known poet. He was a guest artist at the 2025 Global Empathy Conference. He is a recipient of the Veterans Voices Award from the Minnesota Humanities Commission. He has published 4 books of poetry, and his poetry appears in numerous publications. He is the son of deaf parents, a Vietnam veteran, and a lifelong St. Paul resident. Give a warm welcome, please, to George Colburn.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to set up my timer here. I did grow up in St. Paul, and my older brother was a conscientious objector. And we both went to Cretin High School, military Catholic high school, where they teach you to kill for Christ. But I had a very different opinion of the war than my brother did. I wanted to put my hands in the wounds and see for myself. First poem I'd like to read is called The Height of Vietnam. The government hired mobile recruitment vans to drive around Cicero and Watts, urging the poorest to enlist and bring their family out of poverty, or felonious fools to join the armed forces instead of doing a healthy, long jail sentence. The day before my induction, several female war protesters ran naked across the halls of the federal building. On the day of my induction, a man who could neither read nor write was conscripted by the bold X he signed and the smiling sergeant who escorted him through it all. Even though it was required to pass the government tests with at least 60% to be recruited, they accepted 10% to get the quota they needed to sustain the war. Nobody spoke out against how abusive this process had become. No one cared enough to stop it. And if they returned from in-country, no one showed them the way home. Vietnam rekindled. What struck me first was the trading, not with the enemy, but between us. I rode from Clark Air Force Base, Philippines to Cam Ranh Bay, Vietnam in a C-130 carrying San Miguel beer and a pallet full of various wood carvings. Some had already been traded between pilots, crewmen, and grunts. I was met with a Jeep that was stolen from Clark Air Force Base, reported lost, and serviced by selective barter with the motor pool staff. Packaged ham dinners were exchanged for brew with the in-flight kitchen, carvings for boxes of raw steaks, both used to get complete pairs of camo fatigues, including combat boots, from the Army side of the base. The grifting community engulfed the entire base. Air Force side, Army side, Navy side, Marines. Who was in charge of the equipment? No one talked about winning the war. Not a single person cared about it. We only hoped to get home intact, maybe with a nice pair of boots. The lesson. Couple of things I have to explain. Papasan, I think you understand. Quonset hut is a temporary shelter that can go up in about a day. Big auditorium, rounded top type tent. Hercules helicopters were the main helicopters used in Vietnam. They had a place called Herky Hill in Cam Ranh Bay, just outside the barracks. And the last thing is butterfly girls. Butterfly girls were the prostitutes that hung around the base and sometimes in the base. The lesson. The old Papasan and his daughter ran a tailor shop in the Quonset hut up on Herky Hill in Cam Ranh Bay. I looked around in my jungle fatigues at all the Vietnamese silk dresses, silk men's underwear, and several racks of patches symbolizing the absurdity of America at war. A lovely gift for your butterfly girl? Something smooth to sleep in? A hole in your clothes needs mending? She was good at selling his wares and services while he silently sat and pumped the foot pedal on an old Singer sewing machine. Not today, I said, and walking away, she called me back indignantly. We are poor. We have nothing. You must buy, or we will haunt you. Okay, I responded, that patch. As she put it in a cellophane bag, I asked, are you teaching a lesson? No need, she carefully responded. The lesson is all around you. He didn't want the money, but I paid for his meal anyway. We talked and discovered that each of us had lost something in that stupid and political war that we won't ever get back. It had to do with pride and the feeling of self-assurance that our uniforms undermined. Once you put it on, you're lost. The first lesson they teach you is to shrink yourself down to a blindly reflexive automaton, ready to react to commands without thinking. Without thinking. Continue shrinking. Without thinking. And when you're released, discharged, mustered out, and left to think on your own, you struggle to remember how it feels, how to react not from a Pavlovian response, but from thoughts that you own, that have become a series of tentative steps, relearned. And you find it easier not to think and just let the world go on by without thinking. Without thinking. Continue shrinking without thinking. Bringing the war home. The guy who came home had gray eyes instead of the sky blue he left with. The guy who came home spends the day swearing like the world isn't worth a thing. The guy who came home doesn't talk much about anything, particularly not the war. The guy who came home is looking for ambition, for purpose, for something that justifies living. The guy who came home cries alone a lot, doesn't sleep very much, is thin as a rail. The guy who came home is living in a jail of his own making, is constantly breaking into tiny pieces with hearts and minds. The man who came home never forgot the flames, the noise, the gunshot wounds, especially those that remain invisible. The guy who came home never came home in any way that warms or comforts or heals. The guy who came home understands how much is unrecoverable and how very much the past can eat you whole. An undeclared war, poetry born in Vietnam, for sale in the back. I have several poems in here that I really like. I want to read the one I like best first. It's called He Never Said. It's about my father-in-law who unfortunately saw both Normandy Beach and Saipan, Nagasaki after the bomb. He never said anything about it except that he was there walking through the devastation of Nagasaki, part of the first group of Allied soldiers to wander past living corpses in smoky rags and the ocean of tears and sighs and dead. I think he tried once to form words around it, might have shared it since I saw Vietnam, and I just might understand, but I said, no, don't put it out there. Keep it inside. Those words would burn your lips, make your eyes bleed again for no good reason. I don't need to hear. He nodded silently, then showed me where the photos were and said I could look if I wanted, but I should do it when he's gone, when he's not there to feel it. A lot of strange things happen when you're in a combat zone. This was one of them. It's called In the Midst of War. She led me to the marketplace and I bought a bag of rice, some dried fish, bananas. She led me down a dusty road toward a corrugated tin roof shack next to the tracks, where 14 from 4 generations lived like sneak thieves, vying for space to sleep or sit. When grandmother saw us and the food, she cleared a space for me to rest while she cooked, and in between stirring and mixing, introduced me to several thin young men and women whose deep-set eyes told mixed, silent stories, and many cheerfully oblivious children. When the food was ready, she sat me down and indicated I should eat. I asked her to join me, but "You go first," was all she said. You go first. They gathered around me smiling, watching until I stopped. Many of those lookers hadn't eaten in days, but I was the guest who brought the food, so I had to fill my belly first. I was being taught a lesson in manners beyond hunger. The food disappeared quickly after that. I was humbled and embarrassed by this unexpected propriety and stared through the sunlit open doorway. "Where does that road lead?" I asked everyone. "Nowhere," they said. "That road leads nowhere. You can stay here as long as you like." This is the poem I won the Veterans Voices Award for, and I get very emotional reading it, so I apologize if I choke up. The bus trip. A ride across the U.S. bases of Cam Bay in a military bus, 1972. Couldn't even imagine that she would die, but she did. Oliver told me, bleeding and crouched over a bowl, the very next morning near the main gate until she fainted and no one helped her up or even noticed her enough to take her to a hospital. She just died alone in a spilled bowl of blood and left a newborn daughter to be a Malaysian refugee in her own country. Oliver had all the connections. He got the camel green bus with the shiny seaweed green seats and loaded the four of us inside for a ride from the Air Force side to the Army Depot barracks. Under the thick night shining, where the boys and the whores slept in army cots, and music blared out in prefab windows, and the night declared a mad freedom for the grunts and their local girls dancing under the red muddy ground, under innocent but crazy stars. Not certain what he told them, four drunken and drugged up girls, to get them to ride under those green seats for the ride back to the Air Force piece of the base, with their butts on the floor and their legs splayed out, just out of sight underneath. "Be quiet," he told them repeatedly as we came to the checkpoint, and the MPs flashed light up the bus stairs and stood at the front smiling as if they knew but didn't care what we were smuggling. "You stay here, just stay here and make your way back to your bunk. I'll take them back and return the bus to the motor pool. Don't worry, I got this," Oliver told us, and he did, and we did. But the next morning at mess, he told me one had died. Too soon after giving birth, he said. She got back into it too soon, and it wasn't good, and he had to wash the blood off the floor of the bus. And just shut your mouth because the others don't have to know. I'll read one more. It's called The Briefing. This was my first day in Cameron. He gathered us onto the flight line in the middle of a sunny afternoon where we had a clear view of the hills all around the base, several shades of bright and darker green going all the way up to the brown and chewed tops that had been laid waste by helicopter clearing pad bombs, not designed to be anti-personnel, but used that way nonetheless. In the plateau, in the middle ground, red dirt and scrub dappled the vegetation. He began, "I know it seems quiet now, peaceful even, but that can change fast. Any minute those hills could burst forth mortars and rockets, and the perimeter might ping with sparkling gunfire. You are not safe. You will not be safe until you leave this country. Meantime, remember that an attack on this base happens about every 6 days or so. We've lost men in their beds at night. We've lost them in the mess hall, even in the NCO club, dancing and drinking. You'll likely hear a whistle first. As soon as you do, hit the dirt. Get out of buildings, avoid trees, find a trench that you can lay in. You are not safe. If you want to live, then I only need to tell you this once. Duck and cover. Hide yourself quickly. There is no one here to save you but you. You are not safe. Dismissed. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Well, he had some stuff to say. I'm very aware that George is a little bit younger than me. He talks about Quonset huts. When I was in Vietnam, they were called hooches. But nonetheless, I got there early, and I got lucky. You know, we're all in some way affected by war. It's not just the soldier on the front line, it's their family back home, it's the loss that some people experience. I wanted to introduce you to our next reader. Timothy Young has published 5 books of poetry, as well as numerous chapbooks and essays. Robert Bly's The Thousands Press published his first book in 2003, and his poetry appeared in the Best American Poetry of 1999. 2 YouTube channels, Tim Two Boots and Timothy Young's Words, and the weekly podcast, The Two Boots Word Vault. Please welcome Timothy Young.
Thanks, Frank. Thanks to y'all coming. And thanks to George. I wouldn't be here had not a year ago George read a couple of these poems at one of the Poetry in the Park events, and I thought, oh, I have to say something here, because even though I'm not a vet, I've got, how can I say this? The poems I'm going to read are not quite the poetry that I write now. Some of these are going to be a little dark and painful. Language is going to be a bit crude. You'll get my working class resentment in these pieces. Last night, my wife and I watched The Deer Hunter. I haven't seen that movie since it was released back in 78, 79, because I wanted to get that feeling so that I could read appropriately. And my wife is one of 7 sisters with no brothers, so I wanted her to see what it was like as a working class guy growing up at that time. Some of my friends had some of those similar experiences. But I'm going to start with this poem. I wrote this about 15, 20 years ago. God is in everything, even the darkness. Yesterday I walked in the park and I thought, God's in everything. Yet I didn't feel happy or holy. My gloom is tar in the road cracks, a simple repair job to get me by. God is in everything, even the darkness. And I saw machines demolishing the shower rooms and chewing the blue concrete of the pool where I learned to dive into the deep end. 40 years ago, just back from Nam, Sneaky Pete and the first of his many easy wives rented small rooms overlooking the pool. When Pete returned from basic training, we drank to oblivion beneath the stars, across the street, in the trees behind the pool, because we were too young to drink in bars. 40 years ago, under the drooping lilacs, I stopped a gangbang there. And the splayed girl on the warm Chevrolet swore at me. And the young men swore at me. And they all left so I could climb over the fence and swim alone in the dark. Sometimes the swimming pool fills with memories disease. Sometimes lilacs are allergens. Sometimes bursting green elms are preparing to fall. Yesterday, I walked through the park. I wasn't happy, although I thought, God is in everything, even the darkness. "1973, Gramps at 23. Why blind dates? We were 23, and I could tell the girl had no interest in me. Was it my clothes, my name, my looks, my aura? Pete's first divorce had come through, and his new girlfriend of 2 weeks introduced me to her friend. This is Gramps. It's just the nickname. Even though he has a lot of gray hair, we love him. I wore a blue denim work shirt, the kind a banker's son wore to defy his well-to-do parents. And I wore to be like my Gramps, the old cowboy. Was it a class issue as she ran from the outer suburbs to the city? Was she slumming? And was it shame or arrogance or simple disinterest? We were sitting beside the park's mermaid fountain, and I was ready for a cold beer and its healthy foam. The blue sky matched my shirt. White cirrus were scouting for the storm clouds. When Pete was in Nam, his first wife asked me for a favor. Set me up with a blind date with the girl who lived below her in a dingy, messy apartment. I had promised to do anything for Pete and his wife. I took the voiceless, wordless woman to see B.B. King. She had dropped acid, or so she said, and slept through the most painful hour of blues that I had known to that time. Had Pete's new partner used her phony familiarity because Pete affectionately named me? Or did she want to ingratiate herself and her rigid friend to me? Me, Pete's writer friend. We didn't know it then. Pete's girl was pregnant. When he told me, he said he wasn't ready. A month and a half later, when he took her for the abortion, the doctor told them she was far too along. Did she use me to tighten her grip on Pete with the noose of her lie? Was this another way to get into Pete's head so he would pay for her other man's abandonment and pay for her loneliness and fear? Within 6 months, she was gone. We didn't know it then. We were all lonely and afraid and arrogant and 23. So I was like George's brother. I tried to get a conscientious objector status, but my Monsignor wouldn't help me. I didn't know enough. I didn't have enough contacts in Canada or any place else, so I just accepted my fate. This is a little bit longer. Don't forget Gramps, or 6 Ways to Leave the Old Neighborhood. Don't forget Gramps. They called me Gramps. By 18, I had gray hairs among the dark ones, and I wore a necklace of boils and an acne scapular. Beneath my work shirts, I wore piebald t-shirts, stained back and front with blood and pus. Yet the curse of acne was the blessing. It was the blessing when I ran out the front door of the Federal Building Induction Center and headed home, rejected by a gentle Army doctor. Everyone else went out the back door, boarded a bus to the airport, and flew to Fort Bragg and basic training. 6 months later, they camped along the Mekong. Now, don't forget how Crazy Bob, Sneaky Pete, Cootie, and Steve Areno came back from Nam, howled with me, their sidekick and their documentarian. They yelled at me, "Tell our tales, fucker. We're all mother scuzzers, all of us, and we'll stay that way till we die." Don't forget the camper without tie-downs in Crazy's pickup, tearing 80 miles an hour on the interstate headed for the North Shore. And how he mocked the wind as it lifted 4 inches off the pickup's floor. And we yelled and begged for Bob to drive 90. Don't forget smelt fishing beside Lake Superior. Cootie, Sneaky Pete, and Crazy Bob, all of us in chest waders, dipping oversized nets into the icy Knife River current, trying to scoop schools of horny silver fish. We mostly failed and didn't care. Don't forget those few smelt like scaly pricks in a bucket while we drank to oblivion. Sneaky Pete and I stuffed the smelt down the back of Cootie's pants after he passed out. And he rolled in his stupor, squishing and scratching, mushing and mashing fish flesh into his hinder's crack. Hours later, when he woke up, stinking and unfazed, he laughed with me, laughed with Sneaky Pete, laughed at his own mess. Then Strawberry came back, yowling like a panther. "It's not me, it's the rest of the world." He had eaten shame. In the Marine Corps and in his father's home, he ate shame. He nearly drowned in a training pool because he couldn't swim, especially with a backpack. "You're no Marine, Strawberry." The sergeant laughed as he sank like a big rig's gearbox. They yanked him out, flopping like a bullhead without whiskers. While driving semis in Okinawa, he volunteered 4 times to go to Nam, and they turned him down. "You're no Marine, Strawberry." 2 years after his honorable discharge, he strung himself from a pipe in my basement, strangled himself while gurgling on the phone with his ex. Then Crazy Bob caught his wife humping his best friend. Bob drove his Harley 100 miles per hour off a dead man's curve, long before Thelma and Louise did it movie style. Steve Areno, the sniper, returned from the jungle with his feet crusted and stained to black. He bragged that he'd changed his boots only twice during the year-long tour. 10 years later, he divorced Crazy Bob's sister and finally married his high school sweetheart. Then he began to suffer the migraines. He hit her once, went into his bedroom, put his pistol in his mouth, and sucked lead. His dad, a World War II vet, offed himself in the 50s. His stepdad, a Korean War vet, did it too in the 60s. We blamed Steve's icy-eyed mom. We were wrong. After Nam, after smashed cars and mashed fists, after fights and cackling, crackling liquored days, Cootie asked 27 women to marry him for love. I witnessed 6 sincere proposals myself. In '83, I won a literary prize in the humor category for my short story about Cootie's fractured love life. After 30 years and a few divorces, his heart gave out to the weight of his drinking and the nightmares he could no longer withstand. Cootie met Sneaky Pete right before he left Nam. And Pete, minutes before he flew out of Nam, locked his sergeant in a remote meat freezer. Once back in St. Paul, he spent his money and lost his money on hookers, craps, and painkillers. Then he simply disappeared into a suburban fog. In the 70s, Crazy Bob and Strawberry were the first to leave the neighborhood and the planet. Steve Areno waited until the 80s. In the 90s, the old neighborhood died for me. I married, gathered my boy and wife, and moved out of state into bucolic isolation. What do I do for my neighborhood friends? Sprayed like high-octane fuel through the cultural carburetors into cylinders of hatred's machinery. What do I do with this neighborhood's compost but turn it and turn it and turn it with the pitchfork of my pen until it's shit so old it's sweetness? What do I do because they once yelled, "Don't forget, Gramps. Don't forget our tales, our scuzzer tales. Don't forget, Gramps."
So as you can see, we all have different stories, and each of us has to figure out the best ways to process them. It's not easy. Jessi Marie will read next. Jessi Marie is a mother, healer, veteran, poet, lover of Scrabble and charcuterie. Her writing touches on lived experiences and themes of motherhood, military, mental health, grief, healing, and humanity. Jessi is a Minnesota Humanities Center 2019 Veteran Voices awardee, a member and facilitator of Warrior Writers, a board member of the League of Minnesota Poets, and the Minnesota Assistant Counsel for Veterans. She is a 2023 Pat Tillman Scholar and U.S. Army veteran who served in Iraq in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Her work has been published by Noden Press, the Cuddy Foundation, Iliad Press, McGregor Publishing, the International Library of Poetry, and Middle West Press. Her first full collection, The Time War Takes, which is on the back table, came out in April 2023 and received honorable mention in Senators Bob and Elizabeth Dole's Biennial Award for Distinguished Book in Veteran Studies. And it was also made a community of literary magazines and presses must-read for Women's History Month in 2024. Please welcome Jessi Marie.
Thank you. I couldn't get my kids to come, so then I could just read poetry about them. I'm going to read a couple from my book and then a few newer pieces that I've been working on. One that's a little rough around the edges still, but I'm going to give it a go anyway. Hurry up and wait. We sat on planes as they flew over oceans and lands that we didn't see, countries and their people going about their everyday things as we traveled off to war. We sat on convoys, transporting us from one location to the next, never really knowing where we were and if we were ever actually going to make it there. We sat in chow halls with our M16s slung across our shoulders. We sat in workstations, getting the day's tasks completed, trying hard to find moments of peace. We digested all that was around us, keeping us hungry and wanting, yet tired and waiting for our time to go home, still not satisfied. We sat in MWR centers and took turns using computers to send emails home, pretending that everything was fine and that we were okay. Enough time passes that we forgot the time has passed, each day almost like the last, getting used to gunfire and missile attacks. We sat in vehicles, offices, C-130s, Chinooks, Humvees. We sat in 120-degree sweltering heat without saying a single word about what we thought it was all for. We sat on the long-awaited bus that brought us to airports and boarded planes that brought us home. Then we sat on couches in living rooms, feeling like strangers in familiar places. We sat in silence and discomfort as those around us tried to understand how and when we changed. No one ever bothered to ask us why. Some of us still sit in grief. We sit in VA waiting rooms, on psychologists and therapy couches to talk, try to regulate, try to feel, waiting now on diagnoses that remind us that we are no longer young and that war never leaves. My grandmother was a war riveter. I named my oldest daughter after her. Her name was Emma. She was one of my favorite humans ever, and she died while I served in Iraq. And getting a Red Cross message while you are serving in a war is probably one of the most gutting experiences I think a person can have. And so a lot of my poetry is written for her and about her. God and lice. My grandmother Emma cried when I told her that I was going off to war. She was so proud that I was serving in the army, but she could not bear the thought of me going off to Iraq, just a young lady. She didn't want me to see what she had seen, or worse, not come home as I once was. When I asked her, she would recall stories to me about her young adulthood and what it was like. She worked in a factory as a war riveter that took in the uniforms from the dead soldiers to mend and reissue. I wondered how many times a uniform could be brought back, returned, only to be brought back again. She worked with other women, sewing and patching and washing, then folding up into brown paper packages to be sent back to Uncle Sam for another young man to wear. One batch of uniforms was infested with lice. She and the other women did not know until they began to itch. They had to shave off all of their hair on their bodies, head to toe. She was embarrassed by this, but she told me anyway, so that I would know what her frail body had endured to support war. What I would know what the other side had seen, what she had saw. She knew death, and she did not want me to go. I kissed her goodbye that day. I told her I would write, that I would think of her and her courage would help me. She gave me a cross necklace to wear to keep me safe. Several months into my deployment at Camp Caldwell, Iraq, I received a Red Cross message that she, my hero, my grandmother, my heart, had died. I watered the desert that day with my tears, threw my Kevlar against a brick wall. I touched the cross at my neck and cursed to a God I no longer believed in. Many people join the military to escape their upbringing and their surroundings and to pay for college, to build a better life for themselves. And I like to bring attention to that because that was one reason why I made the decision to serve and join. So this poem is a little bit about that. It's called Come Home. In the deep woods of northern Michigan, I would walk and play for hours, pretending to be anywhere and anyone else, a solid escape, finding treasures and refuge, shell casings from a .41, aluminum twist caps from Pepsi Cola bottles, faded cans of old Milwaukees, a sock missing its pair, the perfect piece of wood for the side wall of our fort in Billy Joe's backyard, ice cakes in the winter, mud pies in the spring, endless stars in the summer, red maple leaves in the fall, cool rocks, broken radio parts, decapitated Barbie heads broken apart from mean older cousins, rusty metal pieces from things that no longer work. I'd spend all day finding these things in the woods, wandering until dusk, seeking solitude without loneliness, quiet without fear, never wanting to leave. I still retreat to the woods when the noise gets too loud or when life feels too heavy. Perhaps I'm still looking for the one thing I didn't find. Them, family, saying, I'm sorry, we love you, come home. Switching gears, gotta go to the other part of my phone. This is a new one that I just wrote. It's called Going to War. A lot of stuff in the news right now, having children, a little scary, bringing kids up in the world today. It's a little bit about that. Going to war. My teenage daughter, now paying attention to local and national news, asks me if I'm scared. Scared that we might end up going to war. And I respond with a solemn yes. Yes, I am scared. But the truth is that I don't tell her I am terrified. I have been to war, and that war is still inside me. It has never left. At night, I pray for peace, for safety, for hope. I pray to a God I lost belief in, a residual of going to war. I've spent my life in two places, one dark, one light, 1 foot in Iraq, 1 foot here. I can feel the desert sand on my skin, a permanent abrasion. Feel the heat, smell the smoke, it lingers without remorse. That's the penance of going to war. I can't go through that again. The knowing, the destruction, the death, the memories I have from what seems like a lifetime ago, change from soldier to student, student to nurse, nurse to mother, and still and always going to war. How do I keep these pieces? How do I keep them safe? Keep them safe. Keep them safe. Keep them safe. I don't dig foxholes anymore. We dug for hours at annual training in the thick summer heat, humidity on full blast. 4 feet wide by 4 feet deep or so. No one was measuring. If you had a sense of humor, it looked like we were each digging our own graves. We passed bitch sticks during smoke 'em if you got 'em, and bitched when our packs were empty. Sweat poured down into crevices. No field shower of baby wipes could wipe clean enough to feel fresh. Full battle rattle and maybe even a little extra camo face paint to drive home playing soldier for 2 weeks. This was our preparation, our training for defending and protecting, for going to war. We landed in Iraq under incoming fire, immediately running from the C-130 to a nearby bunker with only our M16s and Kevlars on our person. We stayed undercover until we got the all clear, learning quickly that the rest of the shit didn't matter. A few days later, we were picked up in hillbilly armored Humvees protected by sheet metal and sandbags, as if that would stop anything. Our living quarters were desolate. Connex shipping containers converted into a CHU, a fun acronym for a container housing unit, not so fun when they were windowless with improperly installed AC and unarmored. In the 8 months I spent downrange and the 18 months I spent deployed in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom, I dug into letters from home. I dug into care packages. I dug into trying to belong, yet always feeling like an outsider. I dug into exercise to pass the time. I dug into the painful existence of war. I dug myself open. I didn't dig one fucking foxhole. Now home, with years past, like so many, I sift through the memories and try to fit into the uniform of life, noticing all too much where it hurts and feels uncomfortable, trying to replace the memories with regulation, to make amends for having contributed to war and in so many ways to death, to practice gratitude and forgiveness, and to do so without forgetting, to remind myself that there can be pain and joy, to listen to my therapist when he says, "You are allowed to rest. You don't always have to be digging." And then this is the last one that I'll read. I wrote this. This one just sort of like poured out of me during the conflict with Ukraine when the women and children were moving to the underground bunkers. I was actually at the gym running on the treadmill. And it just hit me. And I was really thankful that I didn't have children when I went to Iraq. I was in my early 20s. And I just thought of like how challenging that would be to be a mother in Ukraine and to be in that situation. And it just, as a mother and as a war veteran, just shook me to my core. And I just sat down on the treadmill in the middle of the gym and started crying because I'm a big, deep feeling person. And I got out in my car and this poem just poured out of me. So here it is. Things that keep me awake at night. Oh, I'm going to say one more thing about this poem. It was the first time that I tried to write a poem where the last line flows, the last line is the same as the next line as the first line. Things that keep me awake at night. I had a mother. I had a father. I did not know. That's how I got here. I don't have them anymore. I don't have them anymore. But I still long for their guidance. I still, at 40 years of life, cry myself to sleep. I cry myself to sleep because now the world feels lonely. I feel the mosaic of grief and joy coexisting in my bones. Now I have 3 daughters. I have 3 daughters, and the oldest is so kind. Her eyes, blue like topaz, have been watching, calling out injustice since she learned to speak. The middle child is still learning to breathe, riddled with anxiety since the tender age of 7. I gave her this. I tried to stop my epigenetic cascade from crossing over, but I didn't make it in time. In time, we will overcome, because I speak the language of love and healing that hasn't been done before. The youngest, her wild heart is fierce and determined. She knows what she wants, and she is loud and she is brave. And how do I keep her that way? How do I keep her that way in a world that is burning, crying and begging for change? And just when I think we are close, someone sends a bomb or a gun in a school and we are at war again. Again, we are back scattering, heads in our knees, ear covers I closed. It hurts too much to see. You see, I wanted to give them the world. Isn't that what all mothers dream? Now I am unsure. Now I hold on to the thread of trying to remain human. I hold our heavy hearts and try to teach tolerance and love instead of being controlled by fear. I fear I forgot how to pray a long time ago, but lately I find myself with a whisper. Lord, whoever you are, keep us warm, keep us safe, give me strength. Give me strength when I feel like Warsan Shire with her hand on the globe, asking, where does it hurt? My heart is that globe. We are that globe, spinning in the direction of a future, waiting, asking collectively, where does it hurt? Everywhere. And where can it heal? Everywhere, everywhere, everywhere.
Hi everybody, I'm Bill Anderson. Thank you for being here. I have a large commercial interruption that I'm going to save for after the panel discussion, because this is too good to interrupt with nonsense. I met Frank Gioia a few years ago. He came to a Cracked Walnut member event. We talked quite a bit afterwards. Hit it off right away. Felt like we had a whole lot in common. And occasionally I make good decisions. One was I'm telling people, hey, I'm looking for help. I need some help putting together events. And Frank said, I'll do one. I went, okay, that's tonight. So thank you for that. Thank you all for being here. Frank Gioia is a writer, actor, and playwright. His memoir, The Mercury Man, a collection of short stories about growing up in Brooklyn in the 1950s, and his Army experience, was published in 2023. He was awarded an Army Commendation Medal for his service in Vietnam. He's currently working on a poetry chapbook. Frank Gioia. Frank.
Thank you, Bill. I'm going to read a few short stories from my book. I think I'll let the stories speak for themselves. The first one is called First Impressions. The long line of wrinkled khaki moved slowly forward. Pasty-faced farm boys and tough guys with vacant eyes. Newly minted lieutenants and lifers who had been there. A stewardess hugged me as I left the plane, and I felt exposed. She had read the fear in my eyes, and it reminded me not to get into any poker games. Outside on the open air bridge, I was smacked by heat so intense that not even riding the IND line in summer had prepared me for it. We fried on the seething tarmac, while the roar of aircraft engines and the frenetic swirling of helicopter gunships mingled with the acrid smell of burning fuel. Tan Son Nhut Air Base, October 1963. I grabbed a seat on the Army bus and tried to calm down, breaking into laughter as a platoon of ARVN troops passed by holding hands. It would be okay. I would only be here for a year. Guys from the block had done more time for doing a little dealing. Piece of cake, I thought. But who was I bullshitting? The bus dropped me at Battalion Supply, where I was issued combat boots, a steel helmet, and an M1 rifle. My ass was dragging. I would have killed for a shower. My mouth felt like someone had pushed my face in the sand at Rockaway, and sweat poured from my newly muscled body. Previously a chubby guy, I was now a middleweight, thanks to Army Basic and food so bad that fasting was often the best alternative. I was napping, dreaming of undressing the winning contestant in the Miss America pageant, when the wailing sirens stunned me awake. It was still daytime, and through the screened walls of the barracks, I watched young boys posing as men, rifles in hand, scattering in all directions. Still groggy, I was fully awakened by the screaming of a private sent to find all the stragglers to report for duty. Grabbing my weapon, I ran to my post. My stomach churning, I stared wide-eyed and terrified as 4 T-28 bombers maneuvered like silver birds in the blue sky and took turns swooping down out of the clouds to drop their ordnance. Like circus acrobats, they returned safely ahead of the puffy white imprint of the anti-aircraft fire to await their next turn up. Fortunately, we were not the target. The bombing was directed at the palace of President Diem and his sister, Madame Nu. The Kennedys had grown tired of Saigon's feeble efforts against the Viet Cong, and these precision flyers worked for the CIA. It was time for a change, and we had made a trade. Generals Min and Tu would be the major players on our new team. A heated exchange caught my attention, and I watched as an Asian non-com argued with a sergeant major. Although only a staff sergeant, he would not back down. He was making the point that we, his men, were technicians first, then soldiers, and there was no fucking way he was going to get us killed playing G.I. Joe. Eventually, we were ordered back to the barracks. In the future, we would only be issued our rifles if he said so. My heart skipped a beat. Who was this savior? Sergeant Kane turned out to be a lifer from Maui who had chosen the Army over poverty after doing 2 tours in World War II. He had served over 20 years and wouldn't see another stripe unless he could change his pigment from yellow to white. Under the parachute-shaded hooch, somebody broke out a bottle of Johnny Walker, clean glasses appeared, and we began to tell our stories. Randall, clean and white from the Midwest, joined to protect our Christian country from communism. Wife and 2 kids back home. Yoshi, tough guy from Samoa, drafted at 20, would be returning home next month and carried his swagger stick to prove it. Lynch, black kid from Newark. Do time for boosting that car or serve your country, said the man sitting up high in the flowing midnight robe. Schmidt, pimply-faced drunk with 6 years of service and only 1 lonely stripe to show for it. Me? The street life had seduced me, and I needed to get out of the neighborhood for a while. In walked Russo, lugging a care package from his politically connected family in Rhode Island. never gave a thought to not doing his duty for God and country. Besides, it would look good on his resume if he decided to run for Congress. The first whiff was heaven, aged provolone that would make your gums itch, and dried sausage to marry it with, marinated mushrooms, roasted peppers and olives, panettone and biscotte for dessert, and Rousseau, drenched with the generosity of his immigrant parents, sharing it all. Hey, somebody pass the whiskey. So I'm going to read 3 of these short stories. That's what I refer to them as. Most of this book is really about Brooklyn and the 50s and growing up on the streets. But there is more than a little section devoted to my time in Vietnam. This is called Just a Little R&R. They walked into the office real casual like, the lieutenant colonel, followed by the captain. Maybe he was a full bird. I honestly don't remember. Usually when a senior officer is around, you get a heads up. Not this time. The captain all smiles as he made the introductions. Sir, this is Specialist Gioa, the soldier you were asking about. Really? He was asking about me? That can't be good. The colonel held out his hand. It's a pleasure to meet you, young man. I want you to know your work hasn't gone unnoticed at HQ. So they knew who I was. Another soldier in the fight. Vietnam. Not something that thrilled me. The less people knew your name, the better. When I joined the Army, they assigned me to the Signal Corps for advanced training. When I failed out of a technical repair course and was being transferred, they noticed that my administrative scores were off the charts. So after threatening me with 3 years in the infantry, they decided to try me in supply, like Klinger. Well, I couldn't figure out if a transistor was bad and which one, if any, had to be replaced. I knew how to make sure it was in stock and how to locate it when it was needed. The colonel went on to say that because of the system I had developed, very few choppers were being grounded. In fact, it was so effective, he was sending me to Soc Trang in the Mekong Delta to teach it to the supply team down there. I would probably get a medal, a real superhero. Look at it as a little R&R, he said. I should be at the airfield early to catch the first flight out. Then he said, be careful, young fella, and good luck. Be careful? Good luck? That didn't sound very reassuring. Until then, I had refused all offers to go for rides on the helicopters. Hueys were always being shot down, so the smart move was to stay on the ground. A camouflaged C-47 transport plane with Puff the Magic Dragon painted on the fuselage was loading when I got there. I found a seat and settled in among the skids of cargo and bloated green mailbags. I was feeling pretty anxious, freaking out to be honest. But we took off from Saigon without a hitch. During the 2-hour flight, we all relaxed a little, talked about going home, and chain smoked like it was our last puff. Because, hey, you never know. Then I noticed the sacks of letters that could have crossed in the mail. "Dear Johnny," it might say, "how are you? We miss you very much." The reply, delivered by men in dress khaki, standing at attention: "Dear Mrs., Mr. and Mrs., a grateful nation mourns your loss." As the plane began its descent, we could hear the sounds of pop, pop, all around us. I was scared shit, but it's not like there was anything I could do. Then one of the journalists who was hitching a ride told me to get ready. When the plane's wheels touched down, the rear cargo door opened and the plane accelerated. The skids rolled out the opening and we ran toward the light, against the forward movement of the plane. When my feet hit the ground, I immediately fell on my ass. Dazed, I saw the plane gain altitude, heard the popping sounds again, and watched the fireworks explode against the blue sky. This is not what I had in mind. I mean, where in hell have they sent me? I spent 3 days in the Delta, constantly on edge. I barely slept, if you don't count the time I took a nap while sitting in a chair, drinking a rum and coke in the shower. Like some rock and roll gig at the Paramount, the light show began every evening as day turned to night. Tracer rounds lit up the dark sky and mortars whizzed by overhead. "Don't let it get you down, man," one of the guys I met there told me. "The VC are just letting us know they're out there. We may control this little strip of land, but this is their country, and they will kick our asses out before we know it." "That works for me," I said. "What are we doing here anyway? They can have this godforsaken jungle. Yeah, book me a ticket to ride. As long as I'm traveling upright, get me the fuck out of here." So we'll have a little Q&A after I read this story. And then we have to leave time for an open mic as well. So I'm going to close with this. It's called "I Was in a War Once." I met a guy at a party a few years ago, and he told me I probably had PTSD. "What are you talking about, man?" "No way," I laughed. "Whatever you're smoking, I want some." "Post-traumatic stress disorder," he said. "I mean, pretty much everybody who was in Vietnam has it. The government, they pay me like over $1,000 a month. You just have to get checked out." "Fuck that," I said. "I'm fine. Besides, there's no way I let Uncle Sam back into my life for a few bucks." But on the drive home, I started to think about that time at the movies. It was after I moved to the Berkshires from the Catskills, after I met Susie on the train. More than a decade had passed, and we were worrying about our kids having to register for the draft. I was taking classes with the American Friends Service Committee so we could figure out a way for our boys to beat it. We went to see Born on the 4th of July at the old Mahawi, the old heating system chugging along, trying but failing to raise the temperature a degree or two. I spent a year in Vietnam as a 20-year-old while I was still a boy, coming home, no longer a boy, getting out just as the Gulf of Tonkin episode turned into an excuse to fight a real war. I can still see the general in the mess hall, his chest covered with campaign ribbons and flashing lots of shiny brass. For me, it was still a country club war then. Cooking Italian food in the company kitchen, getting high with Billy, and spending long Saturdays with Jackie in her room. But my most searing memory, the thing I'll never forget, was the body bags. Lying on the ground, tagged and waiting to be shipped home. The fear of flying horizontal. I don't go to the movies much. The smell of make-believe butter on designer popcorn makes me nauseous. I was sitting there, hugging myself, trying to get warm, when I felt my chest tighten. I couldn't breathe. I was still a young man, only 47, but I thought I was having a heart attack. A few seconds later, I was running down the steep, narrow stairs to the men's room, sitting on the toilet and crying my eyes out, not knowing why. It happened again, a few months later. I was driving across the Hudson, listening to NPR. It was 1990, the first Iraq War. Saddam had invaded Kuwait, and Poppy Bush had sent troops to the Middle East. There was a report about soldiers fighting the oil fires, how the intense heat was scarring their lungs, shortening their lives. First I teared up, and in no time I was bawling. I started to write this piece on December 18th, 2016, a day after seeing an obit in the Berkshire Eagle. The deceased guy had been in Vietnam. They said he tried to protect the Vietnamese from the horror at My Lai, when on March 16, 1968, at least 300 men, women, and children had been massacred by U.S. forces. The tears started to run down my face. Now the military patrols our southern border to protect us from the brown people trying to escape a different kind of war. Last month, I wrote a piece about coming home from Vietnam, how I conned some hick private into believing I was married so I could live off base. In this story, I was young Frankie again, a Brooklyn tough guy. I started to tell the story to Susie, and the tears just flowed. The men in my family only cried at funerals, so I'm not sure when I received that gift. I'm not a tough guy anymore. It's hard sometimes, but to be able to feel pain also allows me to feel joy. I never fired my weapon in Vietnam, never was shot at, but I heard the mortars overhead, felt the fear of knowing places I had been were bombed, and carried my anxiety every second of every day. The war was an experience that never leaves me. Vietnam was more than 60 years ago, but the crying, the heartache, and the guilt never end. I never know when grief might decide to pay me a visit. I am not a blank page.